Winter in Boston blankets the streets in white snow. The view from the window of her small Cambridge apartment was calming for Caroline Martin. Her 6-year-old daughter Emma sat by the window, drawing a snowman. Caroline smiled at her daughter's drawing as she took off her pharmacist's white coat. "Emma, that's a lovely snowman." Emma turned around and gave her mother a beaming smile. "Can we make one in Grandma's yard at Christmas?" Caroline's smile froze for a moment. The invitation from her mother Vivian remained on the kitchen counter. The first invitation in 2 years. Christmas dinner at the mansion in Beacon Hill. She took a slow, deep breath. Yes, we might be able to if it snows. Every time Caroline set foot in her mother's house, she felt the same anxiety as if she were a teenager again. Her mother Vivian was a well-known figure in Boston's social circles. And her sister Audrey also lived in the same world. Both of them looked down on Caroline and Emma, constantly making remarks that hinted at their lack of refinement. "Behave in a manner worthy of the Martin name." That was her mother's favorite phrase. But for Caroline, even the Martin name itself was a burden. As a pharmacist working at a community hospital, she had found her own path. Still, her mother and Audrey continued to criticize her for failing to meet family expectations. Standing in the kitchen preparing dinner, Caroline thought about her father Joseph. He had been estranged from the family since leaving home 10 years ago. The official reason was work commitments, but Caroline knew the truth. Her father could no longer tolerate her mother's domineering attitude. "Mom, have you ever met Grandpa?" Emma suddenly asked. Caroline hesitated for a moment. "Yes, I used to see him often. But now, he lives far away." Emma tilted her head. "Why don't we go visit him?" "It's complicated, Emma," Caroline answered with a smile. "Sometimes that happens when you grow up." After dinner, while Emma was taking a bath, Caroline picked up the invitation again. The words printed on the high-quality paper seemed to accuse her. She had continued to put up with everything for the sake of peace. For Emma. Out of a desire to let her daughter have a relationship with her grandmother and aunt. The phone rang. Audrey's name appeared on the screen. "Caroline, did you receive the invitation?" Audrey's voice was sweet yet cold at the same time. "Yes, I received it." "You're coming, aren't you?" "Mother is planning a special dinner. And she's invited Judge and Mrs. James Hamilton. You know them, don't you? The famous." "Yes, I know them," Caroline sighed. "You're bringing Emma, right? I hope she's learned some manners. Last time was a disaster." Caroline bit her lip. At the last dinner, Emma had merely knocked over a glass. A completely normal occurrence for a 4-year-old child. But for her mother and Audrey, it was evidence of poor discipline. "Emma is looking forward to it," Caroline feigned calmness. "She's prepared gifts. Handmade ones." On the other end of the phone, she could hear Audrey snort. "Handmade? Well, I suppose that's fine. We selected some lovely items from Williams-Sonoma." After hanging up, Caroline sank deep into the sofa. When Emma came out of the bath, she sat next to her mother with wet hair. "Mom, are we going to Grandma's house?" "Yes, we are," Caroline gently stroked her daughter's hair. "You'll see Grandma and Aunt Audrey." Emma's face brightened. "Grandma's house is really big, right?" "Yes, it's a very large house." Caroline made up her mind. For Emma's sake, she would try to build a good relationship. It might look like a perfect family gathering on the surface, but she didn't want her daughter to feel the tension lurking underneath. She looked at the handmade gifts, scarves she had knitted for her mother and Audrey, and Emma's drawings framed, and took a deep breath. It will be all right. This Christmas will be different, Caroline told herself. On Christmas Eve at dusk, Caroline and Emma arrived at Vivian's mansion. The Beacon Hill estate glowed with Christmas lights, and a large fir tree adorned the entrance hall. Emma squeezed her hand in excitement, and Caroline took a deep breath. "Isn't it beautiful?" Vivian greeted them at the door. Dressed in an elegant deep green dress with silver jewelry, her perfectly coiffed white hair shone elegantly. "I thought you might be late." "Good evening, Mother." Caroline kissed Vivian on the cheek and handed her the gift bag. "Merry Christmas." Vivian glanced at the present and placed it on the table. "Oh, thank you. I'll open it later." She looked down at Emma. "Emma, can you greet your grandmother properly?" Emma stepped forward and performed the curtsy she had practiced. "Good evening, grandmother." "Merry Christmas." "So you've learned a proper curtsy," Vivian smiled thinly. "But couldn't you have chosen a more elegant dress?" she added in a low voice to Caroline. Caroline bit her lip. Emma's simple red velvet dress was the best she could afford from a month's salary. "I think she looks lovely." Several guests had already gathered in the living room. Judge and Mrs. James Hamilton, Priscilla Walker, a board member of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and Robert Crane, a local real estate tycoon, with his wife. Audrey was enjoying conversation with them, champagne in hand. "Caroline!" Audrey exclaimed dramatically. "Everyone, this is my sister. She works at a community hospital. And this is her daughter, Emma." The guests greeted them politely, and Caroline returned their smiles despite her nervousness. In front of others, they played the role of a perfect family. "Caroline, your hospital has been in the news lately, hasn't it?" Mrs. Hamilton said. "Is it difficult with the budget cuts?" Before Caroline could answer, Audrey interrupted. "Caroline avoids such political discussions. She's a pharmacist, so she doesn't really understand the management side of. Actually, we've been strongly advocating for the importance of community healthcare," Caroline said quietly but firmly. "Judge, our staff appreciates your views on the recent healthcare access bill." Judge Hamilton raised an eyebrow, showing interest. "Would you share your perspective with me? Voices from the field are valuable." Audrey pressed her lips together, gripping her champagne glass tightly. Meanwhile, Emma was fascinated by the Christmas tree. Her eyes sparkled at the glittering ornaments and twinkling lights. "Don't touch," Vivian warned. "All those ornaments are special imports from Europe." Emma nodded obediently, but she couldn't help reaching for a beautiful glass angel. Before Caroline could say anything, the ornament fell to the floor and shattered into pieces. The room fell silent. "I'm so sorry." Caroline hurried to Emma's side. "Emma, are you okay? Are you hurt?" "My Venetian glass angel." Vivian's voice was cold. "This child has no discipline at all." "Mother, she's only 6, Caroline said in a low voice. "It was an accident." "An accident, you say, after breaking my things in my house?" Vivian smiled at the guests. "Well, we all have our own ways of raising children." The guests displayed uncomfortable smiles and tried to resume conversation. Caroline began picking up the broken glass pieces while comforting Emma. "Stop that," Vivian said. "I'll call the maid. You are a guest, after all." But her voice was laced with sarcasm. Caroline took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Emma, apologize to your grandmother." Emma said in a trembling voice, "I'm sorry, grandmother. I didn't mean to." Vivian nodded coldly. "Be more careful next time. Even children have responsibilities." As dinner time approached, guests were escorted to the dining room. Emma's eyes widened at the sight of the luxurious table settings, gleaming silverware, and crystal glasses. Caroline sat next to her daughter, quietly teaching her how to use the napkin. "Tonight's main dish is my special roast beef," Vivian announced from the head of the table. "It's prepared with a special aging method, using herbs imported from France." When the food was served, Caroline detected a slight off odor. For a brief moment, her training as a pharmacist triggered a warning. Something was wrong. But to avoid conflict with her mother, she remained silent. "Caroline, I wanted to ask about Emma," Audrey said in a sweet voice. "As a single mother, how do you teach her proper social skills?" The conversation around the table quieted. Emma is a wonderful child, Caroline answered quietly. We value respecting each other and living with compassion. Oh, that's wonderful, Priscilla Walker said. But isn't it difficult for a child without a father's presence? Girls especially are influenced by their fathers, Robert Crane agreed. My daughters say they couldn't live without me. While maintaining a calm exterior, Caroline felt anger rising within. The topic of Emma's father was taboo for her. After a brief marriage, he had left with another woman and hadn't contacted them since. Emma is growing up surrounded by love, Caroline said. That's what matters most. Of course, love is important, Vivian said. But isn't a proper environment equally important? Growing up in Beacon Hill naturally instills the right kind of refinement in children. Caroline gripped her fork tightly. Her patience was wearing thin. Emma looked up at her mother anxiously, and Caroline smiled reassuringly at her daughter. Now, everyone, Vivian raised her glass. Let's toast to this wonderful night. A perfect Christmas Eve surrounded by family and friends. After the ringing of glasses subsided, Vivian said with a satisfied smile, Now, everyone, please enjoy my special roast beef. The preparation method is a secret Martin family tradition. Caroline quietly stared at her plate. The surface of the roast beef was glossy and beautiful, but the cut section revealed a slightly grayish color. Her pharmacist's training warned her again. Emma looked at the meat with curiosity. It's a pretty color, Mom. Yes, Caroline smiled, but worry grew in her heart. Around the table, guests had begun to taste the meat. Vivian, this is wonderful, Priscilla Walker praised. What is this distinctive flavor? That's my secret, Vivian answered proudly. A special aging method and rare herbs from France. Caroline slowly pierced the meat with her fork. As she cut into it, a stronger odor emanated from inside. She immediately put down her fork. What's wrong, Caroline? Audrey's voice had a mocking tone. Don't you like Mother's cooking? No, I'm just taking a break, Caroline chose her words carefully. Emma had already cut a small piece of meat and put it in her mouth. Just as Caroline was about to say something, Emma's expression changed. She suddenly spat out the meat and covered her mouth with her napkin. Emma. Caroline placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder in surprise. Mom. Emma said in a small voice, filled with fear and confusion. This is rotten. A sudden silence fell over the table. Vivian let out a laugh. A laugh without warmth, cold and sharp. Poor upbringing makes everything taste rotten, I suppose. Audrey also snorted. Even a dog wouldn't complain, they eat anything, she added, as if verbally saying laugh. An uncomfortable atmosphere spread among the guests. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, and anger rose in Caroline's heart. She reached for Emma's plate and divided the meat with her fork. The interior of the meat was clearly discolored, with grayish-green areas visible. The smell was undeniably that of spoilage. As a pharmacist, Caroline immediately recognized the danger. Mother, this meat is indeed spoiled, Caroline said calmly. Vivian's face froze. What are you saying? This is premium aged beef. Of course it has a distinctive flavor. Aging and spoiling are different, Caroline said. This poses a risk of food poisoning. Caroline, Audrey said sternly, you always overreact. You simply don't understand the taste of fine ingredients. That's right, Vivian agreed. This meat was specially ordered from a chef yesterday. The same quality used in 3-star restaurants. Caroline looked around the table. The other guests were anxiously examining their plates. Priscilla Walker, who had already eaten some meat, was slightly grimacing. Everyone, I believe this meat isn't safe, Caroline said in a professional voice. I'm a pharmacist and I've been trained in food safety. This meat clearly has the smell of decay and its color has changed. Well, I'm shocked, Vivian couldn't hide her anger. Are you trying to ruin my dinner party? Mother, I'm only thinking about safety. Safety. Vivian slammed the table. You just want to embarrass me. That's always been your way. Caroline looked at Emma. Her daughter wore a frightened expression, clutching her mother's dress sleeve with her small hand. Still, Judge Hamilton said uneasily, there is a distinctive odor. That's the characteristic of premium aged beef from France, Vivian said severely. Perhaps it's too complex for American palates. Mother, Caroline said quietly, why don't you try it yourself? Vivian hesitated for a moment. She stared at her plate and stabbed the meat with her fork but didn't bring it to her mouth. I am full. The appetizers were enough. At that moment, Caroline realized the truth. Her mother knew the meat was spoiled. Yet, to maintain appearances, she had continued to serve it to her guests. Is Emma wrong? Caroline asked quietly but firmly. Or did you know? What are you saying? Vivian's voice trembled. You haven't taken a single bite, Caroline said. Neither has Audrey. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably. Priscilla Walker held her napkin to her mouth and coughed. This is beyond disrespectful, Vivian's voice was filled with anger. You and your ill-mannered daughter don't belong at this table. Tears fell from Emma's eyes. Caroline quietly rose from her chair. There was a dignity in her movement that hadn't been there before. We've had enough, she said. Emma, let's go. Caroline picked up Emma and moved away from the table. Audrey raised her voice. Running away again? That's typical of you. Always running away when faced with difficulties. Caroline stopped and turned around. I'm not running away, I'm protecting my daughter. Perhaps what you don't understand is what true love means. The guests gasped, and tension spread across the table. Leave, Vivian said coldly. Don't ever set foot in this house again. Don't worry, Mother, Caroline answered quietly. I promise I won't, unless you apologize. Caroline and Emma headed to the entrance and took their coats. Emma's small shoulders were trembling. It's okay, Emma, Caroline said gently. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you were very brave. Outside, the cold winter wind greeted them. Snow had begun to fall quietly. Caroline helped Emma into the car and started the engine. Mom, is Grandma angry? Emma asked in a small voice. Grandma can't admit her mistakes, Caroline carefully chose her words. But you were right. That meat was spoiled. Why would anyone eat spoiled meat? We don't, Emma. That's the right thing to do. We don't eat things that are bad for our bodies. As she drove, Caroline made a decision. She took out her cell phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in a long time. It took several rings before there was an answer. Hello, a man's voice came through. Dad, Caroline's voice was quiet but filled with strong determination. Is this Joseph Martin? Caroline. The voice mixed surprise and concern. What's wrong? At this hour. Dad, the evidence of your promise has come together, Caroline said. I can't take it anymore. On the other end of the phone, Joseph Martin's voice changed. I understand. Let's meet first thing tomorrow morning. After hanging up, Caroline looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Emma was staring at the snow outside the window. Emma, Caroline called gently. Tomorrow will be a special Christmas. You'll get to meet your grandfather. Emma's eyes lit up. Really? I'll meet Grandpa? Yes, Caroline smiled. It will be a different Christmas than before. I promise. The car continued quietly through the snowy streets of Boston. Christmas morning brought a peaceful quiet to Caroline and Emma's apartment. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, covering Boston in white. Emma had awakened early and was opening the modest presents placed under the Christmas tree. Caroline checked the clock while drinking her coffee. 9 o'clock. Joseph had said he would come at 10. She had mixed feelings of nervousness and anticipation about facing her father after 10 years. "Mom, what kind of person is Grandpa?" Emma asked, hugging her new doll. Caroline smiled. "He's kind and wise. And always valued justice. Why couldn't we meet him until now?" Caroline exhaled deeply. "It's complicated, Emma. But today, everything will change." The doorbell rang. Caroline felt her heart racing as she walked to the door. When she opened it, a tall man with graying hair stood there. Joseph Martin wore an elegant coat and held a small gift box in his hand. His eyes immediately filled with warmth when he saw Caroline. "Caroline," he said quietly. "Dad," Caroline's voice trembled. After a moment's hesitation, Joseph stepped forward and embraced Caroline. "Emma, come here," Caroline called her daughter. "This is your grandfather." Emma came forward shyly. Joseph knelt before her and smiled gently. "Hello, Emma. I've finally met you." He offered her the present. "Merry Christmas." Emma accepted the gift and with childlike directness asked, "Why didn't you come see us all this time?" Pain crossed Joseph's face. "That's because Grandpa had important things to resolve. But it will all be over soon." The three sat in the living room, drinking coffee and hot chocolate, gradually bridging the 10-year gap. Emma quickly opened her heart to Joseph, sitting on his knee and bombarding him with questions about her new present, a beautiful antique small music box. After Emma went to her room with her new toys, Caroline and Joseph faced each other with serious expressions. "Tell me about last night," Joseph said quietly. Caroline told him everything. The Christmas dinner, the spoiled roast beef, her mother and sister's reactions, and the final humiliating words. "Emma was so brave," Caroline said. "She told the truth and was shamed for it." Anger flashed across Joseph's face, but quickly returned to a calm expression. "Caroline, this is just one example of what you and Emma have endured for years. Dad, while you were outwardly estranged from the family, I was actually in contact with you," Joseph completed her sentence. "And I was gathering evidence." Caroline frowned. "Evidence?" "I am the executor of your grandfather Harold Martin's will," Joseph explained. "Vivian and Audrey don't know that. Their lifestyle is supported by the Martin Family Trust Fund that I manage." Caroline's eyes widened in surprise. "But they said they inherited all the assets." "Apparently so," Joseph gave a small laugh. "In reality, your grandfather was wiser. He trusted me as his son, and you as his granddaughter." "But why 10 years?" "Preparation was necessary." Joseph stood up and looked out the window. "Today, we'll go to Vivian and Audrey. And reveal everything." Past noon, Joseph's luxury car stopped in front of Vivian's mansion. Caroline gently told Emma, "Emma, wait in the car for a little while." When Joseph and Caroline rang the doorbell, the maid responded with a surprised expression. "Mr. Martin. Tell Vivian that Joseph is here." His voice had regained an authority he hadn't used in a long time. In the living room, Vivian and Audrey were still having breakfast. Both froze at the sight of Joseph and Caroline. "Joe?" Vivian stood up. "How?" "It's been a while, Vivian," Joseph said calmly. "What do you want?" Audrey said with hostility. "And after last night's disgraceful behavior, how dare Caroline come here?" "Quiet, Audrey," Joseph's voice was stern. "I have something to tell you both." Joseph opened his briefcase and took out documents. "This is the original will of Harold Martin, your father, Vivian." "What are you saying?" Vivian's voice trembled. "Father's will was already executed. Everything is mine." "What you saw was a forgery," Joseph said severely. "I am the actual executor of the will. And the trust fund has a dignity clause." "What?" Audrey exclaimed. "This clause requires behavior that doesn't bring shame to the Martin name," Joseph continued. Years of abusive behavior, especially toward Caroline and Emma, violate this clause. There is evidence, Caroline said. I've been keeping records. Emails, messages, recorded conversations, including last night's dinner. The color drained from Vivian's face. You can't be serious. And the true content of grandfather's will is? Caroline looked at Joseph. Joseph quietly nodded. Caroline is the primary inheritor. Harold valued her integrity and diligence. Lies. Vivian screamed. I have protected the Martin family. The social status, the honor. What you've protected is just appearances, Joseph said sadly. True dignity is showing compassion and respect for others. Audrey stood up and stepped forward threateningly. I'll take legal action. This is unacceptable. By all means, Joseph answered calmly. But the evidence is irrefutable. And I'm still one of Boston's top lawyers. A heavy silence fell over the room. Caroline stood next to Joseph and quietly said, what I wanted wasn't money. Just dignity for my daughter and myself. She looked into Vivian's eyes. Mother, for years I sought your approval. But now. Get out, Vivian's voice was cold, but fear mixed within it. Gladly, Caroline said. Emma will no longer be exposed to your poison. Caroline and Joseph turned to leave. As they headed toward the entrance, Audrey cried out. You'll regret this, Caroline. We're family. Caroline turned around and gave a sad smile. You don't understand what real family means. But I hope someday you'll learn. Back at the car, Emma peered anxiously from the back seat. Was everything okay? Joseph smiled at his granddaughter in the rearview mirror. Everything's fine, Emma. From now on, things will get better. Caroline reached for Emma and held her small hand. It's a new beginning, Emma. The beginning of a real family. The car drove away from Beacon Hill into the snowy streets of Boston. On a bright spring afternoon, as sunlight illuminated the streets of Cambridge, Caroline emerged from the hospital pharmacy and glanced up at the sky. Her new position at Massachusetts General Hospital allowed her to fully utilize her abilities. Much had changed since that Christmas 5 months ago. The Beacon Hill mansion had been put up for sale, and Vivian and Audrey had been forced to move to a modest apartment. Their society friends disappeared as soon as they lost their wealth and status. It was proof that only superficial relationships had surrounded them. Caroline had used part of her grandfather's inheritance to establish the Martin Family Support Foundation. This foundation was created to help families in difficult situations, particularly victims of emotional abuse and single-parent households. Emma had made friends at her new school and looked forward to visiting Joseph on weekends. Her relationship with her grandfather deepened day by day, and Joseph truly enjoyed the time with his granddaughter. The phone rang in Caroline's office. Caroline, we have an emergency patient, the head nurse's voice came through. Vivian Martin. She was rushed to the emergency room with a sudden rise in blood pressure. Caroline paused for a moment. She is. Your mother? I didn't know, the head nurse said in a surprised voice. Should we assign another doctor? No, Caroline said with determination. I'll handle it. When she entered the hospital room, Vivian looked small and frail. Her former dignity had faded, and her figure lying in the white hospital bed evoked complex emotions in Caroline's heart. Mother, Caroline said quietly. Vivian opened her eyes in surprise. Caroline. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not your primary physician, but I wanted to check your medication, Caroline said in a professional tone. Why? Vivian searched for words. Why are you being kind? I've been. Because it's my job, Caroline answered succinctly. But her eyes showed sadness, not hatred. Weeks later, Vivian's condition stabilized, but she found it difficult to live alone. Surprisingly, Audrey appeared and began taking care of her mother. She had become quiet, and her former arrogance was gone. On Christmas Eve at dusk, a Christmas tree glowed in the warm living room of Caroline and Joseph's new home. Caroline had hesitantly invited Vivian and Audrey to dinner. The doorbell rang, and Emma ran to open it. Vivian and Audrey stood there. Both wore tense expressions, but Emma stepped forward without hesitation and hugged her grandmother. "Grandma, you came." Tears welled in Vivian's eyes. "Thank you, Emma." The table was set with homemade dishes, and Emma proudly brought out a chocolate cake she had made. "I made this for everyone," she smiled. As they sat down, Joseph raised his glass. "To family. Not just connected by blood, but bound by mutual respect and support, true family." That night, as they were leaving, Vivian took Caroline's hand. "Will there ever be a day when you can forgive me?" "It will take time," Caroline answered honestly. "But we are family. Perhaps it's time to begin real healing." Her words contained not hatred, but hope.